This is the Sixth Man Show, an Orlando Magic podcast, with your hosts, Luke Sylvia and Jonathan Osborne, covering all things Magic basketball. By fans, for fans. Go Magic! What's going on, Orlando Magic fans? You guys are back with the Sixth Man Show. Today is May 23rd, 2024. Jonathan Osborne here, as always, joined by my co-host, Luke Sylvia. Luke, what's going on, man?
Just these weeks are going by quickly because of my personal life, but slow in the basketball world for me. I love NBA basketball through and through, and the playoffs have been exciting, all that stuff. But after your team gets knocked out of the playoffs, I almost become a little bit apathetic. And then you can call me a casual NBA fan for that. Don't get me wrong. I'm still watching some of these games, watching the end of them if they're close. But like outside of that, I'm like, my team's out, and I just want to keep seeing the Magic play, and that's not going to happen. So I'm a little bit, I'm becoming a little bit more checked out, maybe a little more selfish that I wish my team was in it after they showed us that they deserve to be in the playoffs in general. So yeah, that part of life is going pretty slow.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. It's no secret I am a casual NBA fan. I'm not passionate about the NBA. I'm passionate about the Magic. So yeah, when the Magic aren't playing, sure, if I'm sitting around, nothing else to do, and one of these games is on, I turn it on. Obviously, I enjoy it. I love basketball, but I don't hunger and thirst for NBA basketball the way that I do for Magic basketball. So that just sort of is what it is. So I've been spending my time playing golf and playing watching anime and playing video games that I've missed out on for the past 6-7 months or so. So that's where I'm at. Some exciting Orlando Magic news, although it was expected. Tuesday, it was announced that our boy Jalen Suggs was voted to the NBA second team all-defensive team. He received 18 first-place votes and 63 second-place votes, finishing with 99 points, which landed him on the second team behind Alex Caruso, who received 130 total points. To me, that's kind of crazy that Caruso finished that far ahead of Jalen Suggs. The second team is Alex Caruso, Jalen Suggs, Derek White from Boston, Jaden McDaniels, and Drew Holiday, also from Boston. And the first team is headlined by most of the premier bigs, defenders in the NBA, Rudy Gobert, Victor Wembanyama, who was the first rookie ever, I believe, to be voted to the first all-defense team, Bam Adebayo, Herb Jones, Anthony Davis, Herb Jones obviously being more of a wing than a big man, but not a single guard on the first team, Luke. Now with these, again, newer formats, most voters are going towards valuing rim protection, which is understandable. That's why you see so many of those bigs on that first team. But Jalen Suggs, I thought it was interesting that he finished 31 points behind Alex Caruso, when Alex Caruso, I don't think is a better defender than Jalen Suggs, number one. I think this is more of a case of you have to earn the reputation of being one of these guys. And I think next year, Jalen Suggs, I would not be shocked at all if he either made the first team or was the leading point getter on the second team. But what were your thoughts on Jalen making the second team here?
Yeah, I mean, as far as the Alex Caruso stuff, I'm not shocked by it, and Alex Caruso is a great defender, so it is
plays
what
in
it
a
is.
Big market.
Yep, and also Jalen Suggs, like it gives him maybe he doesn't have the goal, maybe we can have the goal for him of getting more votes than Alex Caruso next year, right? Like as long as there's something to strive for, first team obviously will be in his sights, ahead of Alex Caruso will be in our sights. And we can go from there. I think the bigs being first team is ridiculous. Truthfully, like when you're looking at bigs, like you look at these guys on this list, right? It's easy to put these guys first team because they're getting like 2+ blocks a game, and you can't watch all 82 games, and you can't it just feels to me like super ridiculous, honestly, for all the bigs to be first team and then the guards to basically all guards and Jaden McDaniels to be second team. I think if you want to go this route, like the writing's on the wall, if you want to do a center defense or a bigs defensive team and a guard defensive team, do that instead. There's no way that none of these guards didn't deserve to be on first team over some of the bigs that got in. Like, it's just, that was kind of crazy to me, but is what it is on that end. I'm just not crazy about it. I would much rather say like, let's do a bigs and guards defensive teams if this is how it's going to play out every year.
Well, yeah, them shifting it to positionless, this is just the way that it was always going to go. Because when you're thinking about it, if you are choosing physical traits and skill based traits for a ideal defender, one of the biggest things that you're going to value is rim protection, right? Like taking away the other team's most valuable looks, which do come at the rim. So yeah, they're going to put a premium on rim protection. That's just the way that it's going to be with this being positionless. I don't really like the fact that it's positionless because even though you look at the all NBA teams, those are supposed to be quote unquote positionless, but you're still seeing most voters vote in a traditional way, like they are trying to form a team with two guards, two forwards in a big, somewhere along that line of thinking. I don't think that's going to change. They just changed it to this. It would be kind of silly for them to change it back. I don't know that I hate it. I just think for like Jalen Suggs, that just gives him motivation of like, oh, I'm going to be first team all defense, even though I'm a guard. Like I'm going to be that good that I'm going to force the voters' hands. And yeah, I do prefer the more traditional. I think there's a nostalgia to that. It's sort of just what we're used to. I'm definitely not the type of person that likes any type of change, if I'm being honest. So I don't hate this, but I do prefer the more traditional way of thinking about like forming an actual team. But moving forward, like Rudy, Victor Wembanyama, Bam Adebayo, Anthony Davis, it feels like you can just lock those guys into the first team, at least for the next couple of years, at least.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. Like my whole point with that is that like it's easy to just look at blocks as a stat category and be like, oh, they average 2+ or they average close to 1. If you're Bam Adebayo, obviously, like with guards, it's hard to, unless you watch every game, it's hard to really know who is just an incredible defender at the point of attack, who's incredible just on the perimeter in general, who's able to kind of stand their ground against a forward when it comes to like free throw line extended and in. It's hard to gauge that unless you are actually locked into all of these games. Whereas blocks are the highlights always. And that naturally becomes a stat category to watch. So yeah, it is what it is, like I said, but that's just kind of my qualm with it.
Well, once again, just a big congratulations to Jalen Suggs. We expected this. We had our guy Manny that does a lot of our social videos put the clip that we released right after the announcement. He had been working on that for weeks. We just had it sitting ready to go for whenever the announcement dropped. We knew this was coming, but it doesn't change the fact that it's a massive deal, for Jalen Suggs. Speaking of Orlando Magic guards, a little bit later in the episode, we're going to do player grades for the Magic guards, so stay tuned and listen for that. And then Wednesday night, a couple hours before we sat down to record this episode, the all NBA teams, all first team, second team, third team, those teams were announced. Paolo Banchero did not make any of the all NBA teams, unfortunately. He did receive 2 second place votes and 4 third place votes. Trying to pull this up to see exactly who he finished behind in terms of the voting. So Paolo Banchero in basically other players receiving votes finished behind Zion Williamson, Victor Wembanyama, Rudy Gobert, Tyrese Maxey, Paul George, Jaylen Brown. A couple of those guys, to me, like Zion, finishing over Paolo Banchero, I think is a little bit silly. The fact that Paolo only received 2 second place votes and 4 third place votes and finishing with 10 total points, I think is a little bit silly. I thought he was going to be like sort of a fringe third teamer. And honestly, with the voting, didn't really come anywhere close. Now, there's something else that we're going to talk about in a minute here, but I think the biggest problem with the voting Jalen Suggs got there, right? Because, the Magic were, second or third ranked defense throughout the course of the season. They were the first ranked defensive team in the NBA post the All-Star break. Obviously, they played really good defense in the playoffs. But that narrative all year long, like one of the best defensive teams in the league, typically deserves to have one of their guys voted to an all-defensive team. And Jalen Suggs, because of the minutes that Jonathan Isaac was playing and some of the other restrictions that he had to deal with, Jalen Suggs was by far and away the most defensive or impactful defender on a nightly basis, just given the fact that he was playing a lot of minutes, playing the other team's best perimeter players on a night-to-night basis, and had the most eyes on him. If you turned on an Orlando Magic game, Jalen Suggs was popping off the screen defensively. So it's sort of like a reputation award. But overwhelmingly, I still feel like these voters did not really watch enough of the Magic to really have a well-informed opinion on a lot of these guys. Maybe you watch Paolo Banchero a handful of times, even 10 times this year, and you're looking at the box score, you're looking at his efficiencies and stuff like that. And then you go, okay, I watched this guy a handful of times. Maybe he didn't jump off the screen. And, if you look, he's not maybe as efficient as you would like. But this is a kid that, the last couple of weeks of the NBA regular season had the Magic primed to finish as high as second in the Eastern Conference. So I feel like what he does so far from a national perspective has been really undervalued, in large part just because people do not watch the Magic. But much like Jalen Suggs, and we're hoping that, sure, he finished on second team, finished behind Alex Caruso. Hopefully a couple of those things will be viewed as a slight, and he'll be able to take that as motivation in the next season. And I guarantee you Paolo Banchero is looking at this and is going to use that as motivation going into next year, Luke.
Yeah, shout out to Paolo. I think even though, he maybe didn't, like you said, he didn't technically wasn't above guys like Zion, where he was a point behind, right? Even though he wasn't there, he still was ahead of guys like Bam Adebayo, DeMar DeRozan, and those are only the guys on the list. De'Aaron Fox, that's still something to kind of beat your chest about. If you're Paolo Banchero, he won't do that. We can do that for him, but that's a great sign. Obviously, we know Paolo is special. Will continue to do that. But just the fact that he's already ahead of in these conversations for voting for things like All NBA, ahead of a guy who is super talented like DeMar DeRozan, who finished the year with basically 24 points a game, 48% from the field. DeMar DeRozan is DeMar DeRozan. So in any world that you get votes above him, you're going in the right direction. And even De'Aaron Fox, who was voted Clutch Player of the Year last year, right? There's a guy who has a great reputation around the league. And Paolo's finishing above them. I think that obviously points to a super bright future for him, and was super exciting to see.
Speaking of super bright future of Paolo Banchero, whether you believe it or not, The Ringer today released an article that various members of their NBA writing staff put together, and they called it the best of the NBA's next generation rankings, which they are ranking the best 25 players, 25 and under. For a guy, Paolo Banchero, who's coming off of such a great season, made an all-star team, was the best player on a team that took a Cleveland team to 7 games, received votes for All NBA, all this kind of stuff, right? Just off the top of your head, just if you were to throw out a random number of where you think Paolo Banchero would and probably should fall on this list, my guess before I read the list was, okay, he's got to be somewhere between the 4 to 7, maybe even 8 range, right? No, Paolo Banchero came in at number 9 on the Ringer's, again, best of the NBA's next generation rankings. And I'm going to start at number 1, Victor Wembanyama. I feel like it's a little bit too soon, but if you're trying to project over what they're going to do in the future, okay. Number 2, Anthony Edwards. 3, SGA. Number 4, Luka Doncic. To me, this is where we start, getting a little bit murky here. 5, Tyrese Halliburton. 6, Tyrese Maxey. 7, Chet Holmgren. 8, Jalen Williams. And then number 9, Paolo Banchero. Now, if the rankings themselves were not bad enough or were not problematic enough, when it comes to the Ringer's piece, their reason for doubt of Paolo Banchero is, and I quote, "It feels cliche, but considering the fate of every star that has come through Orlando, there's the question of whether Paolo will play his entire career in Florida or be enticed to leave for someplace far away from the Magic Kingdom. And sensing this threat, whether valid or not, I'm going to jump in here. It's not valid." Okay. Back into the quote. "Will Orlando's front office make panic trades instead of naturally growing the roster organically? We'll see." Number one, not the same front office that has been dealing with these issues in the past. It feels like overwhelmingly for the better part of the last decade, whenever, especially folks at the Ringer, excluding Bill Simmons, Ryan Russillo, Kevin O'Connor, Chris Vernon, and Steve Cerruti, guys that are for the most part pretty positive when they're talking about the Magic, but the rest of their NBA staff, overwhelmingly for the past last 10 years, they continue to talk about the Magic as if Rob Hennigan is still the GM here, even though we're going into Jeff Weltman's, I believe this is going to be his 7th, if not 8th season at the head of this team. And it's not Rob Hennigan. It's not, John Weisbrod. It's not Otis Smith. It's not these guys from the past. There's a new front office here. There's absolutely no reason to be putting out, questions like this. And I can tell you, Luke, almost exactly how it went when they were going through and making this article. They started with Victor at the top. They started making their way down, and they're like, ooh, who do we really like? Oh my gosh, we watch 87,000 OKC games a year. We've got to have Chet. We've got to have Jalen Williams on there. We love the way that those guys bark. Let's see. Who else can we put? Oh, wait. Oh, yeah, Paolo. Oh, where are we going to put Paolo? We watched like 5 Magic games this year. We can't put him above Jalen Williams. That doesn't make sense. We can't put him above Chet Holmgren. Oh, wait, but Paolo did make an all-star team and looked way better than both of those guys in the playoffs. You know what? This is how we're going to validate this. We're just going to joke that nobody cares about the Magic, and because their stars keep leaving, Paolo just has to leave too, right? And then they all giggled and decided to put this article out. It is just so idiotic. There's just absolutely no credence to what they're saying here, because Dwight Howard left 12 years ago and Tracy McGrady left 20 years ago and Shaq left 30 years ago. Like, it has nothing to do with this team, and especially the part where will Orlando's front office make panic trades instead of naturally growing their roster organically? What have they been doing for the last 3 seasons? Growing the roster organically. What have they been avoiding for the past 4 or 5 seasons? Making panic trades. There's absolutely no reason to believe that either of those things will happen. It's just like, you try to give these national outlets the benefit of the doubt, and every single time they show that there are just absolute morons working for these outlets.
Yeah, I mean, the best part has got to be the reason for doubt paragraph, because you compare it to everybody else has actual analysis about their games. Chet Holmgren, they said that he has trouble taking advantage of what should be mismatches against smaller players because he lack of core strength. They also said they listed a couple Chet Holmgren issues. The other one was that he struggles one-on-one, and he showed a lot of struggles one-on-one this year. So it's not like these are small criticisms of these players' games. Like, that is a legitimate issue for Chet Holmgren, and a reason why people have the full right to believe he will never be a number 1 option on a team. So to then just go on and just make a joke, a meme about the Orlando Magic when it comes to Paolo Banchero, it's lazy, it's idiotic, like you said, it's stupid. Like, it is all of those things. Paolo Banchero just set the world on fire on the national stage in the playoffs in his second year. 38-point game, I believe it was. A 43-point game, I believe it was. Like, what are we doing? And also, this is another thing. I get, to an extent, Wemby being number 1. But are we, like, we're already completely signed, sealed, delivered, sold. He's going to be better than Luka Doncic or Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Like, I understand that one more, but Luka, like, Luka's leading his team in the conference finals right now.
So is Anthony Edwards, by the way, right, who's also ranked behind Victor Wembanyama. I've already got Wemby fatigue. I think I had Wemby fatigue like 10 minutes after the draft, and it's not going to go anywhere. The kid is incredible, but these writers just any like creative bone that they used to have in their body just gets eaten up by this like take culture and the desperate need for clicks that they just latch on to everything that they can. Like the Wemby stuff is getting crazy. Most, like you said, most of the other players on this list have like a credible basketball related reason for doubt. And also most other, the vast majority of the players on this list also have like a, bold prediction about them. They don't even watch Paolo Banchero enough to give him a bold prediction. Franz Wagner, who is listed 18th on this list, which Franz's placement, if you look at the rest of the list, I don't have a ton of issue with it. Like Mobley is 15, or tied for 15. Trae Young is tied for 15. Brandon Miller is sitting there at 17, and then Franz is at 18. Like, I don't have a huge issue with that. But when it comes to Franz Wagner, they have a credible reason for doubt, talking about his three-point shooting, but also don't have like a bold prediction. And my guess is just these guys are just looking at the box scores of these guys, and they're clearly not watching the games. We know who's watching the games because people that watch the games are tweeting about how great Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner are and Jalen Suggs is every time those guys play. And we see all of that on Magic Twitter, and it's almost never anybody from the Ringer except for maybe Steve Cerruti, Kevin Clark, Bill Simmons, Ryan Russillo talking about these guys. We know those guys at least watch some Magic basketball. This list is just an absolute joke.
The honest truth is that this will never happen. But the honest truth is that national outlets just shouldn't have these lists. These articles shouldn't exist because I don't fault them for not watching a majority of games for all these teams. I don't. Like it is what it is on that end, and it's just not humanly possible to watch all 82 for every game, for every team, and be able to establish like reasonable takes on everybody. So just the fact of having a list this long is ridiculous. And also the Chet Holmgren bold take, I just because we're crapping on the Ringer at this point, Chet Holmgren, the bold take for him is hilarious and not a bold prediction if you think about it for more than 2 seconds. They say Chet will spend a bulk of his career in the top 1% of NBA defenders, but won't win a single defensive player of the year because of the alien who plays in San Antonio. Yes, thank you for your bold prediction, Mr. Ringer. So it's crazy. Like, I can't believe their reason for doubt for Paolo Banchero first and foremost, but it's ridiculous that people are confidently putting these lists together. And then you're making players tie as well later in that list. Just screaming like we don't really know what to do with these players. We probably didn't watch enough games in general, so we're just gonna make them tie on this rankings list. You shouldn't have a tie on a ranking list. It's all around. This list sucks.
If you're gonna do an honest version of this and a good version of this, you should say these are the best 25 players and under of games that we actually watched, and just leave Paolo off the list and admit the fact that you didn't watch the games. It's just so tired of this. Like, obviously, national media is a big thing. We talk about it all the time, really just because like it's not even about the tension. It's just about the respect. Like, I don't care how much they talk about us. It's just like when you do talk about us, show the team respect, and the respect is like get a good understanding of what you're talking about, right? Like, you don't have to talk good things. We're not asking for like a fluff piece, but it's just like when you continue to talk about this team, like, oh, well, they didn't have a direction for how long. It just shows that you don't know what you're talking about with this front office, who I believe is going into what was it, the summer of 2017. They had the one Vogel year, and then we went into the 2018-2019 season. So yeah, we're going into I think this is the 7th season. Everybody knows I'm not good at math. I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about that. But it just goes to show that you have no idea what you're talking about when it comes to this team. And it's just ridiculous. Like if Biden came out tomorrow and was like, we are outlawing national NBA discourse, I would be all for it. Right. Like I'm it's freedom of speech guy. Absolutely. When it comes to the NBA, it's like either know what you're talking about or just shut your mouth, because you come across sounding like an idiot. And we've paid so much more attention to this list than it deserves. And the bad part is what we're doing is counterproductive, because all we've been doing is giving this piece more attention, which is exactly what they wanted when they made this list and published the list, regardless of whether they actually believe it or not. They want people talking about it. They want people clicking on it.
They know all they know is that Magic fans continue to at them on social media when they say stupid things about us. So they're like, hey, let's just rile them up. Don't even do a reasonable reason for doubt. And we got. And I really don't care.
Well, sometimes they say, oh, let's have a conversation about something if you're Justin Verrier. And then if anybody responds disagreeing with you, your reaction is just to block every single person that responds to you, whether it was respectfully or deservedly so, disrespectfully, just going on one of the most impressive blocks like sprees I've ever seen in my years on Twitter.
The only thing that I like about Justin Verrier is that his header is the Panda Express logo. That's it. That is where it starts. My list starts and ends with him. A lot of times we'll say like that's weirdo behavior. Justin Verrier is just a weirdo, like genuinely a weirdo. I went through his replies like later, and people were coming at him about the Paolo stuff, and he just was like, "Well, where were you guys after game 1 or something like that? Something stupid, where he had the 9 turnover game." And it's like, we were right here. You just blocked us all and couldn't see us. So.
He did see them and then blocked them.
Exactly.
That's the whole point. Where were you guys? We were telling you were an idiot and you were blocking all of us.
Yeah, he's dumb.
Why are you lying? That's just really crazy. Okay.
Yeah.
You know who doesn't lie? Our patrons, when they tell us that they love what we do and they love the community that we're building, because they partner with us and they financially support the Six Man Show. And you can too, by going to patreon.com/the Six Man Show. Every episode, we give a special shout out to our Hall of Fame and Elite Tier patrons, which I will start with the Court Cousins, followed by Drew Gooden, Armin, Carson Tulo, Ellis, Jonathan Borges, Normal, Magic Player History, Gabe Gaines, Wiffle, Michael Martin, Jamel Miller, Michael Salapong, Donkey Punch Dave, Palin, Francis Warren, Pierre A, Dylan Holden, Mr. Mikey, Danimal, Bobby Skinner, Goody 93, Teddy Sylvia, Dalek Lopez, Fuchsia, Bill Fulton, Edmund Lagone, Jose Esquilin, Caleb Pete, Cannibalism, Time, Mr. TV, ESPN Really Sucks, So Does the Ringer, Gear 95 Shred, Junior Bruce, Half Rican, Shahin 177, Bobby the Dawn, Himlo Ben Himro, RM Prof 221, Ray Pastrana, Magic Hit 714, Mysterious Mosley, Victor Cologne, Irish Magic Mike, Austin Lampete, Random Hustle, Only Franz, Maria, Keith Wallace, Fritz, Fritz, Bruv Sal, Kason Green, Santi Leon, Kane Eckler, The Distract, Ahmad Timsa, Chansu, Tom Gadsden, Dead Air, Richard Tuttle, Jeremiah Quintero, Magic Wired, Devo 1980, Magic Matt, Michael Thompson, Mama Richmond, Next Napa, What's Up Playoffs 2024, Dylan Fay, Sammy, David Duffy, Smith Sheiks, Bueno Times, Stantino 1995, Suggs Muggs, Derek Smith, Daniel Anderson Barry. A big thank you to our patrons. You can find us at patreon.com/the Six Man Show. Luke, it is now the time of the offseason where we get into player grades. Each offseason we go through and we start with each of the player groups. So we'll do guards, then we'll go ahead and do we'll do centers next, and then we'll finish up with the forwards, and that'll give us some time to talk about Franz Wagner, Paolo Banchero ad nauseum. So that will be fun. Luke, when we start talking about player grades, I think when we did this last year, we came at it from separate angles of I was just like from top to bottom, like overall grading these guys in the season that they had. And you were coming from the angle of, well, let's do this relative to our expectations of these players heading into the season. And I have adopted your way of thinking about this year. So as we go through our player grades and we give each one of the guards a player grade, we're basically saying like, this is what we're giving them compared to what we expected from them this season. And on this episode, we're going to go through, talk about Gary Harris, Jalen Suggs, Markelle Fultz, Anthony Black, Cole Anthony, Jet Howard. I guess we could have included Joe Ingles in this, but so that we weren't talking about 7 guards in an episode, we're going to label Joe Ingles as a forward, and we'll talk about him in a couple of episodes. Luke, let's start with Gary Harris. I just want to go off of some numbers here really quickly. This season, Gary averaged 6.9 points per game, 1.7 rebound, 1.6 assist. He appeared in 54 games. He started 27. He shot 44% from the floor. He shot 37% from behind the arc, and he shot 60% on 2-point field goals and had 57% effective field goal percentage, shot 76% at the free throw line. And in the playoffs, 4.2 points. He played in 6 games, missed one of those games due to injury, shot 29% from the floor, 32% from behind the arc, 17% on 2-point field goals, and a 41% effective field goal percentage. Luke, what were your thoughts from Gary Harris? Like, what were you expecting coming into the year? And then we can talk about what we would give old Gary for a grade.
My expectation with him is just that he would shoot a higher volume of 3-pointers and make them at like a percent or 2 point lower, maybe, than last season. The season before, he shot 4.5 threes on 43%. I was hoping for 5 or more threes at 40%, 41%. And I was expecting the same defensively, which Gary Harris has a pretty good reputation as a good defender. Most notably, I have said that he does have underrated quick hands on the defensive end. He is incredible when it comes to getting his hand in there to poke the ball out, whether it's deflection as well or to steal the ball. So I really, at that point, that's what I was expecting for Gary. And I don't know that he definitely did not measure up to what I had hoped. I love Gary Harris, more so last season, and came into this season and just kind of completely underperformed in what I was expecting. 30, not even 4 attempts a game from 3, 3.8, and 37% from the 3-point line. I just that was left a lot to be desired on that end.
Yeah, for me, my expectation of Gary was just give us what you gave us last year, right? Maybe playing a few more games, played in 48 games the year before, got to 54 this year. Again, was hampered by the type of like Gary Harris nagging injuries, whether it was a hamstring or a calf string or a sore foot, those types of not super serious injuries, but those injuries that seem to creep up on him a few times a year and keep him out for 4, 5, 6 games at a time. And, played 54 games this year, but you just want and need more from your starting shooting guard in that respect. And in the games that he did play, you mentioned less attempts, less volume this year, and was 6 percentage points less efficient when you compare that to last year. Did more, in terms of finishing, at the rim and in the paint. Less attempts again than the year prior, but was more efficient there. Defensively, I didn't really feel like he had like a lot of drop off. Finished with 0.9 steals, just like he did last year. 0.3 blocks, just like he did last year. Defensively, he was fine. The magic in struggling at times in that Cleveland series was obviously when Gary Harris missed a game and they didn't have that other. Well, I mean, you could argue that they did have another body on the bench to throw at Donovan Mitchell. Darius Garland didn't decide to use it, but with what they were playing with, Gary Harris's defensive presence was definitely missed. And for a guy who is now expiring, it really begs the question of, is this a guy that you want to continue to invest into, even though he is a veteran presence and a good locker room guy, for a guy who seems to be regressing at this point at 29 years old? Injuries continue to be an issue with him. Can you rely on this guy to play 65 to 70 games a year? It just doesn't seem like that is really the case. And then when you add in the fact that he just was not efficient, not nearly as efficient as he was last year shooting the ball from behind the arc. And yeah, his defense is great, but the number one thing that we need from Gary Harris is that efficiency from behind the arc, and increased volume. I think maybe we didn't quite see the volume because Jalen took a lot of that volume and a lot of those shots. And when you look at their 3-point percentages, that was probably for the better. And it does seem like there's like this changing of the guard, no pun intended, with what we expected from Gary Harris. Now we're really getting from Jalen Suggs, and like the best possible version of what Gary Harris could be for this team. Feels like Jalen's already sort of surpassed that. And then when you look at the playoffs, and in 6 games for Gary, 3.7 attempts from behind the arc, shot 31%. Now, I don't want to put a ton of blame on Gary because like you just go up and down the roster. Really, no one shot the ball well in the playoffs. But Gary, given the level of experience that he has, especially in the playoffs, is a guy that on the road, it was like, hey, bro, like we don't have, like Jalen's not hitting shots, Franz isn't hitting shots, Cole's not hitting shots, Paolo's not hitting shots. We need you to give us something. And in an area where Gary had a big opportunity to step up and, pick up the pace for a lot of his teammates, he continued to regress as well. So for what I expected from Gary this year and sort of what he gave us, I gave Gary a D-. I was really disappointed with what we saw from Gary this year.
Yeah, I went ahead and gave him a C-. So not too far off there. Both of us seeming obviously disappointed in expectation versus reality for him. But who do we want to tackle next year?
I've got Jalen Suggs next up here. This year, obviously, we talked about him finishing second, all defensive team, finished 8th in most improved player voting, finished 10th in defensive player of the year voting, finished 13 points per game, which is a career high for him. Played and started in 75 games plus 7 playoff games, career high for him as well. Matched his career high in minutes per game at 27. Career high in field goal percentage, 47% from the floor. Career high in 3-point percentage as well, right at 40% on the year. Career high in 2-point percentage. Career high in effective field goal percentage, 75% from the floor. Again, the 13 points, 3.1 rebounds, 2.7 assists, 1.4 steals, 0.6 blocks per game. And then in the playoffs, 15 points per game. The efficiency definitely came down, 40% from the floor in the playoffs, 29% from behind the arc. Obviously, the turnovers, 2.9 turnovers per game in the playoffs were an issue. But for Jalen, we needed to see another step in playmaking for himself, for others, shot making, knocking down open threes. Wanted to see him take another step as a defender. And we really got all of that from Jalen Suggs. Just really, really encouraged by what we saw from Jalen this year.
Yeah, I mean, from an expectation standpoint for him, you just hope that he would continue on that uptick from the perimeter. You know what he is defensively. He continued to improve there as well, garnering attention from everywhere, non-Magic fans especially. And as far as that expectation really was just continue to improve on the offensive side of the ball, and like you said, in the playmaking realm as well. And he did all of those things with all the accolades that he was able to achieve this season. For me, and I think for a lot of people, like this is an easy grade to give. For me, Jalen Suggs received an A. Like I did not anticipate the jump that he took. And really a lot of this grade hinges on the 3-point volume and percentage. To go from not even 4 attempts a game to over 5 and increase by 7%, that doesn't happen, man. Like that doesn't happen. This dude was shooting from the field 36% his rookie year. And he shoots better than that from 3 in his third year. Like the case closed. Jalen Suggs far exceeded expectation. Even if you had high expectations already, he surpassed them this year, past what you could have imagined. So for me, yeah, Suggs A.
Yeah, I gave Jalen an A as well. I just don't think there's a way to justify anything less than that. Didn't quite get to like the A plus range. He had moments this year where like the start of games, he would really get the offense going and sort of set the tone by getting downhill and getting to the rim. I think that is still like the area that he needs to improve on the most this year, just as well as continuing to evolve and progress as a playmaker and just make better decisions. Relatively low turnovers for the season. I believe it was like 1.7, 1.8 on the year for Jalen.
Mm-hmm.
But like some of the turnovers that he makes is just like you cannot make that type of mistake, right? Like it's not like the first couple of seasons, it was like, oh, he's just rolling the ball off of his foot. It's not so much that anymore as it is just like poor decisions at times. So he does still have some areas to improve on, which to me is a really exciting thing. But even going back to Jalen's rookie year, the reason that I felt like he could at least get to this level of offensive player is because you saw the promise with the shooting motion and just his ability to get to his spots at any time. He's been able to do that, has improved as a mid-range shooter, has improved at getting to the rim, and that's really the next step for Jalen next year. You're probably looking to bring someone else into the offense that is going to be that third option behind Paolo and Franz, but Jalen Suggs is like your third, like 3.5 or your fourth option in an offense, and a guy who I still think is going to get a lot better this year. The Magic have the opportunity to be a much improved offensive team heading into next season. And when you look at the way that his numbers have improved and the accolades that he received, like you mentioned, I mean, I got close to an A plus, but just couldn't quite get there with Jalen.
Yeah.
Next up,
yeah,
or do you have anything else on Jalen, or do we want to move on?
No, I'm just going to the next one here.
Yeah, I've got Markelle Fultz. So Markelle Fultz this year averaged 7.8 points per game, played in 43 games, started 18 of them, shot 47% from the floor, 22% from behind the arc, 49% on two-point field goals, 48% effective field goal percentage, shot 70% from the free throw line, 3.2 rebounds, 2.8 assists, a steal. 1.2 turnovers, better than the year before, but 6 points less than last year, and just basically like in every level of efficiency was less efficient this year. In the playoffs, 6.4 points per game, shot almost 60% from the floor in the playoffs, was honestly really solid for the Magic. I felt like in the 15 minutes per game that he played. First couple of games in the playoffs, you could see as the rotations tightened. Jamal Mosley had sort of a short leash on Markelle, but especially in the wins, gave the Magic a big boost. But what about you, Luke? What did you think of Markelle this year?
Yeah. So coming into the season, Markelle Fultz showed us such incredible flashes at the end of last year, specifically on the perimeter, giving me hope that, hey, he might not ever be a high volume. He will He will never be a high 3-point volume shooter, but maybe he can give us like 2 attempts a game and give us something average, like 35, 36% from 3. After seeing what he was looking like in that shooting motion, how fluid it was at the end of last season. And everyone knows what I'm talking about. And you also hope that he can match like 60 games played at the least again, right? He played 60 last year. He's out the beginning of the year, comes back and really is healthy the rest of the year. Didn't really give us a reason to think that he would be in and out of the lineup ever. You expected him to start every game? Like you expected at the beginning of the season, like before it started, you expected Markelle to start in that starting point guard spot. I was as high as on Markelle Fultz as I had ever been coming into the season, which hurts the grade for him, expectation versus reality. And if we go from 14 to 7 points or the 8 points or whatever a game in the regular season, yes, he was great in the playoffs. But if Jamal Mosley, who is a true players coach, who gives his players quite a long leash, for him to deem you unplayable sometimes and not a starter anymore, and hey, for the most part, we're not going to use you as the ball handler in a pick and roll situation anymore. Probably not going to use you in inverted screens either, pick and rolls, because you can't pop out to shoot, and we know that you're probably something's going to happen at the rim. He's incredible around the rim, but you're not going to trust him in that position. I gave Markelle Fultz a D-. I truly thought that we would get way more out of him this year. I know he thought that. And listen, this all could be out of his control. We found out about the injury that he was playing through. Who knows what happened behind the scenes injury wise, if things like TOS came back. We have no idea. But just the fact that it got to the point where he wouldn't even look at the basket unless he was in the restricted area was insane to see. So for that reason, Markelle Fultz does get the D-.
Yeah, Markelle Fultz on his YouTube channel released a video, about a week or maybe 2 weeks ago, and revealed that he was dealing with some type of like fracture, in that knee, that he missed, some good chunks of the season with. And yeah, the fact that, wasn't super available last season coming from off of a year where he wasn't available until the end of the year, missed the first 20-ish games with the toe fracture last year. And then, you get a few games out of him, and then he's down with like the knee tendonitis, and then was in and out of the lineup for most of the rest of the year there. And when you just look at the fact that really wasn't the same player, now, yeah, injuries can be part of that, but we're just looking at the performance. Like if you're healthy enough to be on the floor and to play, we have to evaluate the performance that you get while you're on the floor. He gets all the credit in the world for playing through injury. I'm not trying to make light of that whatsoever. But at the end of the day, we have to sit and evaluate the way that he performed when he was on the floor, and he was deemed healthy enough to play. So, for me, it's just the fact that he was so inefficient. Really every spot on the floor, at least compared to previous years. And a lot of times it just felt like, hey, we've got this rookie, Anthony Black, on the bench who played a lot in Markelle Fultz's absence and was able to make a real impact in certain situations. And in the situations where like Markelle wasn't looking great defensively, it was like, okay, well then what is he giving us right now? Because he wasn't looking great offensively a lot of the time. So, hey, let's bring in a kid who we know for sure is at least going to give us a spark defensively and is going to be able to be a disruptor and get this team moving and get the ball moving and get the team out in transition. At the end of last year, I was super optimistic about what we were going to see from Markelle Fultz, especially just the way that the team played. Once Markelle Fultz came back from injury last year, it was like, okay, this team is just going to pick up right where they left off. And to their credit, they did. But they did it really without Markelle Fultz for almost half the season, right? Like this team was just awesome, and for the most part without not the most part, but almost half of the time without Markelle Fultz. So for me, I gave Markelle Fultz a C-. I wasn't expecting crazy things out of Markelle Fultz. I wasn't buying into the shooting like some people were. It's just like with that type of injury, it just seems like over time there has to be enough. I don't know if it's nerve damage or whatever, but the shooting motion just never is going to be the same. It just sort of is what it is there. But yeah, for me, I gave Markelle Fultz a C-. Now, let's move on to Anthony Black. Now, Anthony Black, with my grading of him and my evaluation of him, it's a little bit difficult, and I'm not saying this to like make excuses for Anthony Black, but when he's like in the lineup, out of the lineup, he's not starting, it doesn't look like he's going to play. Okay, now we're going to throw him in here in the second quarter. We're going to throw him in the third quarter here. He was definitely just dealt a tough hand, I think. And I think he handled it about as well as possible, both from like a professional perspective, whenever he was asked about playing or not playing or being, put into the lineup, and not playing for sometimes weeks at a time, and then just being thrown, into a game or thrown back into the lineup when other guys are out of the lineup. I felt like he handled all of that really well. Like when he was thrown into the lineup, played relatively well and performed reasonably well. And then just could have, had a bad attitude about the way that things were going whenever he was asked about it, and he never did. Just some numbers for Anthony Black in his first season. He appeared in 69 games. Nice. Started 33 of those games, played 17 minutes per game, averaged 4.6 points, 2 rebounds, 1.3 assists, a half steal. He shot 47% from the floor, 39% from behind the arc, 51% on 2-point attempts, and had an effective field goal percentage of 54%, shot 61% at the free throw line. Luke, what is your evaluation and your grade of Anthony Black?
I mean, to be honest, coming into this year, I wasn't real sure where Anthony Black was going to play, if he was going to play at all. You take one look at the roster coming into the season, and you're like, well, this doesn't really add up. And then you think about Jeff Weltman famously saying now in the Magic area, like, young players have to earn their minutes. That's the where we want to get to. And for Anthony Black to come in at how he did, contribute the way he did in these roles where, like, hey, you're going from not playing to starting and playing 20 plus minutes in a game, that's a lot to ask of a rookie. There's a lot of mental fortitude that has to happen, that has to be had to go from not playing to starting at a moment's notice. So for him, I didn't have a lot of expectations, so it wasn't going to be hard to bump your grade up if you're Anthony Black on like what I'm thinking, expectation versus reality. I gave Anthony Black an A-. Like, he blew me away on the defensive end. You obviously think first, when you were going chronologically, like, you think about that Knicks game where the Knicks come to town and he's tasked with Jalen Brunson on multiple possessions and does more than just hold his own. It's not like he made life hard, just hard for Jalen Brunson, and Brunson still got his. Anthony Black genuinely was disturbing to Jalen Brunson in that game. And that was the first game defensively where I was like, whoa, Anthony Black is going to be incredible on the defensive end. And then you go a step further and you see, like, Jalen Suggs gets selected to the second team all defensive. And Anthony Black, like, commented or shared it, I can't remember. And Jalen Suggs said, I expect to see you here next year, or something to the effect of that, right? So even his teammates, and albeit the best perimeter defender absolutely on this team, saying like, hey, you're up next. When it comes to the defensive end of the ball, it's like, that's a huge stamp of approval. And Anthony Black, like, obviously low volume, but 39.5% from three. As a rookie, Jalen Suggs has shown me anything is impossible when it comes to improving your 3-point percentage. But just the fact that he's starting there, like, as a starting point, that's not bad at all. And as you saw the year go on, he got more and more comfortable with that corner three and his role. So for me, Anthony Black, having very little expectation, it is not ridiculous for me to give him an A-.
I gave him a B-, just because of the fact that, like, in order for me to get to an A, like, for some reason, he didn't really, like, crack the rotation the way that you would traditionally think about it. Sure, when other guys were out, he was put into the lineup, was asked to step up and performed well, but for whatever reason, just didn't really snatch those minutes away from, Markelle Fultz or Gary Harris, or maybe some of the other guys that we would have liked to see Anthony Black get minutes instead of at times. I don't know if it's politics, if it's like the internal team hierarchy, whatever the case may be. To me, it felt like he did play well enough and perform well enough to earn that, but we don't have the whole picture. We don't know what, things look like behind the scenes. I'm not, like, speculating about anything like that. We just very honestly don't have the full picture. So it's hard to say, oh, this is exactly what happened without knowing everything. That being said, like, sure, like, the 39% shooting from behind the arc was super promising. But beyond that, offensively, he just really didn't give you a ton. A guy that's coming in as a point guard now wasn't really given a ton of responsibility in the offense. You had Franz Wagner, you had Paolo Banchero taking up most of the usage in that starting lineup when Anthony Black was starting. But even in moments where it looked like Anthony Black could take advantage of matchups and get to the rim, he wasn't super aggressive in doing so. Now, the times that he did, I felt like he showed some really nice flashes of like finishing at the rim. And like we talk about things like body control and finishing through contact. I felt like he showed flashes of all of that, which is why I'm still super high on him moving forward. But B minus, like to me, is not a slight for Anthony Black. You go back and you watch him in summer league. No way I thought he was going to shoot, although on low volume, 39% from behind the arc. And no way did I think he was going to be as impactful of a defender as he was pretty much from day one, given his size and versatility and everything like that. So was really impressed with Anthony Black. I just couldn't get to an A. Like, had this kid ended up being a starter and like a real rotational piece, probably would have given it. But I mean, we can argue that if Markelle Fultz and Gary Harris didn't have injuries this year, we probably would not have seen Anthony Black really in the rotation. He might have been spending a lot of time in Osceola with Jet Howard, which is crazy to think about. But yeah, to me, like Anthony Black didn't really quote unquote earn whatever earn looks like, didn't really earn his spot in the rotation. So I couldn't quite get to a B, or I couldn't quite get to an A, but by no means am I mad at your grading of a B. Anything else on AB before we move on?
No, not at all.
Okay, let's talk about Cole Anthony. So Cole Anthony is a guy that, for me, I had a lot of expectations of him going into this season, just given the way that he finished the year last year. Like the last 40 games of the year was really, really great, was super efficient, all that kind of stuff. This year, Cole averaged 11.6 points per game, down from last year. He appeared in 81 games, which it makes sense when I think back on it. But I was surprised when I saw Cole played in 81 games this year, was super durable, played 22 minutes per game, shot 44% from almost 44%, shot 43.5% from the floor, shot 33.8% from behind the arc, shot 49% on 2-point attempts, 49.6% effective field goal percentage, shot 82.6% at the free throw line, added 3.8 rebounds, 2.9 assists, 0.8 steals, a half block, 1.6 turnovers, and in the playoffs, 5.1 points per game, only played just about 15 minutes per game, shot 31% from the floor, 15% from behind the arc, 39% on 2-point field goals, and then 34.1% effective field goal percentage. Obviously, we talked about this. I'm not holding playoff statistics really against anybody, especially guys like Cole, Gary, Jalen Suggs, guys that just did not really play well on the road. But for me, Cole Anthony's season was a little bit of a disappointment, just given the way that he ended last year and the way that he started this year. He looked like a guy that just picked up right where he left off. But really like around like December, end of December, heading into January, came back to earth of what we saw really like the beginning or the first half of last season. Now, last season he had some injuries that I guess really could be explanations for that, but played, to my understanding, relatively healthy, although we did hear, quite a few mentions of him dealing with off the court issues. But again, we have to be sort of fair in this. If you're deemed, well enough to play, we have to evaluate the performance that you had on the floor. So for me, I was a little bit disappointed in Cole Anthony just over the course of the year. He had big games, contributed in a major way in a lot of big games. But just overall for the season, I had Cole at a C+.
In year 4, that you would hope that there's still year over year improvement, and we really didn't get that from him.
And just got the extension, beginning of the year. You want to see the team rewarded in that, and
yeah. And to end the year as well, from the perimeter, he was shooting in his last 35 games, he was shooting 40% from 3 and on 3.5 attempts a game. It was even if you have 3.5 attempts a game again, but you shoot about the same as you did your last, if you shoot 38 to 40% on 3.5 attempts, that would have been absolutely great. That would have been passable. Expectation wise for me, I expected him to maybe increase some 3-point volume, not crazy, 3.5 to maybe 4, or closer to 4, I should say. And really the emphasis on getting to be like a 39% or so 3-point shooter. That's what I expected of him. And especially in the role of coming off the bench and really being the guy trusted with the offense, I think he could have done way more than he did this year. Health was great. Playing 81 games was awesome. But you really didn't take the jump that was anticipated on my end. And for that reason, I gave him a C+. Right? So like it's pretty much like it was close to being a C for sure. Just kind of being the average of maybe what I anticipated. But yeah.
Yeah, I wonder how much the implementation of Joe Ingles into this roster and into that second unit really played an effect on Cole.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at his usage percentage. His usage percentage was up compared to last year, so it doesn't really seem to be an issue of like not getting the ball enough. Now, maybe, his role was a little bit different. Instead of just scoring, maybe he was asked to help, facilitate and set others up a bit more. But yeah, it just kind of puzzling as to why, Cole didn't, continue with the improvement. If I had to guess, maybe it's the off the court stuff. And obviously we wish him nothing but the best in getting all the stuff in his, personal and family life figured out. But yeah, for those reasons, for me, Cole's season was a little bit of a disappointment.
I also think it's worth noting when you talk about Joe Ingles having the ball in his hands a little bit more, like running the offense. Maybe didn't hurt usage for Cole, but definitely from the point of initiating offense and maybe getting providing more looks for his teammates. I think he probably did get those opportunities taken from him. You see that in his assist totals. He went from 4 basically to 3 this year. And the part that stinks on that end is that his turnover stayed about the same. 1.5 last year, 1.6 this year. And I mean, yeah, you saw just some crazy, costly turnovers from Cole Anthony this year. And things that just can't happen in year 4 for him. So sucks. And I hope everything gets resolved, whatever he was going through this year, because I would love for Cole Anthony to go back to being a 6 man of the year type candidate that I think is in there somewhere. We just have to find it.
We were absolutely talking about Cole Anthony being like a 6 man of the year candidate, the first month and a half of the season. Like, yeah. I'm pretty sure was like leading the NBA in bench scoring, was close to leading the league in, assists off the bench as well. So like it's there. He just has to be able to put it together for a 82 game season. And especially him being healthy for 81 games is such a big deal. And was still a big piece of one of the best bench units in the NBA. Like, not trying to take anything away from Cole and the impact that he had on the team, but just for sort of, obviously we're talking about what we expected. Cole didn't quite meet what we expected for him this year. Last but not least, let's move on to Jet Howard. And to be honest, like, we had a conversation about whether or not we were even going to include Jet Howard in this. Obviously selected with the 11th pick in this last year's draft. Only played 18 minutes for the Orlando Magic this year and appeared in 29 games for the Osceola Magic. So let's start with his Orlando Magic stats. So 18 games, 3.7 minutes per game, 1.6 points, shot 33% from the floor, shot 28% from behind the arc, 45% effective field goal percentage, not even a half rebound, a third assist, a 10th steal, a 10th block. Just not great numbers for Jet Howard with the Orlando Magic. But I want to say playing every, once every 2 or 3 games and playing at the end of those games and really only playing in a few minutes when you're traveling back and forth between Orlando and Osceola. You're spending time in both locker rooms. You're doing the best that you can in the G League. And then when you come back to the Orlando Magic, even though you're not playing, you're really trying to find what your role is on that team in the locker room. You're sort of the odd guy out going back and forth. Really tough situation for Jet Howard. And just like I talked about with Anthony Black, him handling that whole situation really professionally, I don't think you could have handled this any better than Jet Howard did. Like, you did not hear a single peep of like discontent or frustration or any of that from Jet Howard. And let's talk about the way that he played for Osceola. So again, in 29 games, averaged 18.5 points per game, shot almost 45% from the floor, 37% from behind the arc on almost 10 attempts a game, shot 57% on 2-point field goals, 81% from the free throw line, 3.8 rebounds, 2.2 assists, 0.8 steals, 0.6 blocks. Jet Howard played really, really well for the Osceola Magic this year, showed a lot of flashes offensively as a playmaker, obviously making plays off the dribble. Didn't show a ton for the Orlando Magic, but you have to ask the question, like, what is it about Jet that he wasn't able to see the floor literally at all for the Magic this year?
Right. And that's obviously the huge question. But at the same time, Anthony Black, what do him and Jet Howard have in common? Neither of them really cracked rotation, like you alluded to. And both of them are rookies. And this team just simply isn't handing out minutes. Even Anthony Black, who showed flashes, who, in our opinions, deserved a shot in some of these games, especially when you're just desperate for answers defensively. Why not throw him out there? There is no explanation. There's none. And so for me, I think that the Anthony Black situation was just optics of, hey, he's a rookie. We're not handing out minutes. We're going to make a statement. We're paying Markelle Fultz the money we're paying him compared to Anthony Black. That part being politics. But I think Jet Howard suffered from that. You see Jet Howard, like, ridiculous. What was it? In one of the playoff games, I think it was one of the blowouts at home, Jet Howard comes in and hits a step back 3-pointer, no hesitation. I don't care that it's garbage time. That's an incredible environment that he got an opportunity to play in. The crowd was still buzzing and wanted to see him. And that's a lot of pressure in that moment for a guy who really hasn't played much at all at the NBA level. To that point, he checks in into a playoff game and busts out a step back triple. That's a dude with a ton of confidence. And I just truly don't see how it was his fault that he didn't get playing time. Like, sure, we can say there was a reason he didn't play. But at the end of the day, if it was politics of, hey, we're paying these other guys money to play, starter money, or just playing minutes money, we need to get these guys some run, and then your time will come next year. I could absolutely see that happening. Caleb Houston got a lot of benefit of the doubt and got a lot of run this year, and he played a lot with, a decent amount with the G League last year. So Jet Howard, like 9.5 threes a game, 37.7%. We're still 2 seasons probably away from knowing the answer to this. But could he be your spark plug, Terrence Ross from beyond the arc? How quickly he can get his shot off and make a move as well, getting into that shot is incredible. We've seen it on display. His jumper is beautiful. And regardless of the league you're playing in, almost 10 attempts and 37.7% from 3 is super impressive. I don't know that he does that at the NBA level, especially in his rookie year, right? Like, he definitely doesn't do that. But even if next year he can give you 4 attempts a game at 40+%, and then we build on that and the volume that he gets and the more minutes he plays. So Jet Howard, yeah, it's inconclusive. I have no idea what type of grade you would give him in this scenario, but I do think it's purely just optics as to why he didn't play, and I think that he is going to show us a lot next year if enough players get moved around.
Yeah, if you look at it just like on its face, the 11th pick in the draft, a team that should be relatively competitive, just not playing at all. I don't want to say it's unprecedented, but it's not super common, right? Like, if you're the 11th pick in the draft, you usually get at least a chance to prove that you can't play. Jet wasn't really given that opportunity, at least not to our eyes. Now, maybe he proved that he couldn't play in practice or whatever the case may be, looked good enough in the G League and played well enough in the G League. But if you're just looking at it on its face of what you expected from Jet Howard, like, I don't know how you could give him above like a C or a D. For me, I'm choosing to grade Jet Howard just as incomplete. Yep. To your point, I think there's a legitimate possibility where 2 years from now, Jet Howard is like a real rotation piece, like playing the Joe Ingles minutes, or like next year he might be playing the Caleb Houston minutes or the Caleb Houston role. And I still think there is a chance that 3 or 4 years from now, Jet Howard is your starting shooting guard. Like if he's able to develop, I still think that's a possibility. It just has to be something that we're not seeing. And we didn't see enough of Jet. Like we saw some struggles defensively in the garbage minutes that he played. I don't think I saw anything that told me like, oh, this guy just cannot play in the NBA right now. Never really saw that. So that's why I tend to think that it is more of the politics side of things, with having some of these older guys, these veterans that you're either looking to trade or looking to save them face, or, there's this relationship that these guys have in the locker room, or there's this like maybe unspoken type of hierarchy. I don't know what it is. I find it hard to believe that that Jet Howard just wasn't good enough to play basketball this year. But what he showed in the G League, to me, is really it's encouraging, and I'm excited to see what he looks like next year. If he's not playing at all next year, we have a big problem, and Jeff and John need to look themselves in the mirror, because if they took this guy 11th overall, there were people in the moment that said, like, you could have traded back to 16, 17, 18 if you're looking to take Jet Howard. So if you took a big swing on a guy that maybe you could have taken early, and then you're just not going to put him on the floor at all to see if he can figure it out, that's really not great. But yeah, for me, I don't know how you give Jet Howard a definitive grade, so I gave him an incomplete.
Last thing for me, if Jet Howard doesn't play next year, you better be a top 3 seed. Like, you better show that, like, hey, we just don't need it right now. Sorry. We've improved from the perimeter. We signed a free agent who is a knockdown 3-point shooter, gives us something defensively. Sorry, you're not cracking the rotation just yet. And you are a top 3 team in the East at the end of next season, or competing for that. Then whatever.
Would you consider Caleb Houston cracking the rotation this year?
He played like 14 minutes a game.
I would not consider Caleb cracking the rotation, because it was almost like break glass in case of an emergency.
It was
kind
Anthony
of things.
Black as far as the case it goes. Like, go from playing nothing to starting. Right. There was situations this year where it was Caleb or Jet. That was the clear decision. Who were you going to play? And Mosley went with Caleb, who I know what the counting stats say. I know what the efficiency says. I am saying there is no way in the second half of the year that you're saying that you believe Caleb Houston has a higher potential than Jet Howard. There's no way. And yeah. So that's where it really comes down to me. And even if it's only just that, the reason for that is that Caleb has played an extra season and
is probably further along defensively right now than Jet.
Yeah. But regardless, from a potential standpoint, I just like stiff Caleb Houston. I don't know that we're to the point where we're like, he's got a higher ceiling than Jet Howard by any means. And I would have rather given him run, but whatever. Yeah,
I would agree with that. To me, it was more of like, when Gary's out or Markel's out or whoever, to me it was more like, well, are you going to play AB, and are you going to play Caleb? Not so much Caleb or Jet. And the fact that over and over again it was, no, we're going to start Caleb Houston instead of inserting Anthony Black, back in the lineup, felt pretty crazy. But for me, I don't feel like, because of all that, I don't feel like Caleb Houston broke the rotation. So if Jet Howard is in the Caleb Houston role next season, because we are expecting this team to be better, we're expecting the roster to be better, I don't think it's the this like, big deal if Jet Howard is in the Caleb Houston role next year. We're like, hey, a guy is out, now Jet's in the lineup tonight. As long as he's playing somewhat regularly in significant minutes, like Jet Howard did not see a second of significant playing time this year. It was, if my memory serves me, almost exclusively in games that were already decided. I would be surprised if you came to me and said, no, he played 15 seconds in this game where the outcome was yet to be decided. I don't think that was the case. So if we can go from that to him playing in 40 to 50 games where he averages 15 minutes a game and they're like meaningful minutes, to me, that will be progress. I'm hoping for a bit more than that because we seem poised to be moving on from certain guys. To me, the natural evolution should be like, okay, Jet is going to play, 20 minutes a game next year off the bench. That's what I would like to see. I don't know that that's going to happen. That's what I would like to see happen. But again, yeah, give Jet Howard the old incomplete, the TBD, to be determined, whatever you want to call it. That's going to conclude our player grades. Luke, I don't know if you had anything else to add to this before we go ahead and wrap up.
No, I'm good to go.
I forgot earlier when we were talking about Patreon that tonight, the 23rd, as you're listening to this, we have a patron Zoom scheduled exclusively for our Hall of Fame and Elite Tier patrons. So if you'd like to jump in on that, we're going to be just talking about the season, talking about the playoffs, talking about free agency, the draft, all that stuff that's coming up with the folks that help financially support the show. So if you would like to join in time for that tonight, you can find us at patreon.com/the6man show. We do those monthly where we check in with our patrons, do a little Zoom, hang out, see how everybody's doing, and talk some Orlando Magic basketball. So again, if you're interested in that, you can join the Patreon. But apart from that, that is going to do it for this one. Next episode, we'll talk about the centers and do the player grades for the centers. But let's wrap this one up. For Luke Sylvia, this has been Jonathan Osborne. You all have been listening to the Sixth Man Show, and we will catch you guys next time. See ya.
Thanks for listening to The Sixth Man Show. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes and Spotify to get new episodes downloaded directly to your phone. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to give us a 5-star rating and a review. It helps out the show a lot. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Sixth Man Show. We'll catch you guys next time. Go Magic!